Andy Lipton, and welcome to Leading the Break. This segment features a very special guest, Billy Schaeffer, one of the terrific basketball players in St. John's basketball history. Billy played at St. John's from 1969 to 1973. His coach was Frank Mulzoff, all 4 years he was at St. John's. His teams were very successful. They made the NIT tournament 2 times and the NCAA tournament once. And back in those days, the NCAA tournament only had 25 teams, and the NIT was still considered a very prestigious tournament. Billy's coach those years was Frank Mulzoff. Coach Lou Carnesecca, who recruited Billy, had left St. John's to go coach the New York Nets in the American Basketball Association. Billy also reflects on Coach Mulzoff, and we get to learn more about Coach Mulzoff through Billy. Billy talks about his years as a high school player at Holy Cross, why he decided to go to St. John's, and shares some of his memories of his basketball playing days at St. John's. Start with this with you, Billy. You grew up pretty close to St. John's. Were you a St. John's fan as a kid?
So I grew up all of about 15 minutes away from school. Belrose, Queens. So I used to go to all the St. John's games when I was in high school. And I went to Holy Cross High School, which is about 5 minutes down the road on Utopia Parkway. So I would go to the games. I was basketball wise, when I was a freshman in high school, there wasn't a real bright future for me. Another fellow who played in the pros by the name of Kevin Stakem, who played with Holy Cross, Providence, and the Celtics.
Sure.
We were fighting for the 14th and 15th slots on the freshman team. So we were not very good. So my future in basketball was somewhat bleak at that time. But as I got better and played more, I'd always go to the St. John's games and watch Coach Carnesecca and the teams during those days. And it was right there to be seen. So I took advantage of it.
Oh, and how about before high school? Were you a St. John's fan before high school?
I would say I played lots of sports. Playing baseball and a little basketball. It was almost not so much as a final destination for me. I knew about St. John's and I played my sports, knew about the Yankees and the Mets and all those teams, but it was almost as if you weren't really 100% into basketball. My father was a semi-pro baseball player, and it broke his heart that I said to him in early high school that I was giving up baseball to play basketball, and he was like, "What?" That change was really when I focused more on the basketball side.
So when you're at Holy Cross, when did St. John's start to look at you, start to recruit you? And was it Coach Carnesecca who was doing that?
So it was Coach Carnesecca, and it was probably when we won the city championship when I was a junior. He was recruiting another player, Richie Lyons, who was a backcourt player. And so we won the city championship. And so they probably had eyes on me because of them recruiting Richie.
Okay.
So after we won the city championship, then the real recruiting came about.
Were other schools interested? Did you have offers from other schools?
Yeah, I had lots of offers from, various schools, all the schools of the Big East, the Ivies. I was still somewhat of a late bloomer, and I was a 6'4", 6'5" center, because I was the tallest kid on the team. So I didn't really have a shot. I had a little bit of an inside game, but at 6'5", that wasn't really a center height. But they thought I'd probably grow a little bit more and, develop other parts of my game. So, it really came down to say Providence, Holy Cross, St. John's. Um, so those were the almost the finalists of looking at schools to go to.
Were you close to going to another school, or was it all St. John's all the way?
No, I was very close to going to Holy Cross. Jack Donahue was the coach. I couldn't make up my mind where I wanted to go to school. So it came down to a situation where I couldn't decide. And Coach Carnesecca and Coach Donahue were like, come on, you got to make up your mind. Let's get this thing over with. It was very difficult to do. I had close relationships with both. And then I decided to go to St. John's. Coach Carnesecca, my parents, obviously being in the New York area, could see me play. I thought New York was better for the media side of things. So if I did play well, the mecca of basketball would help out. So that was the decision.
Did it help that Richie Lyons had already been there a year, and you knew him?
Yeah, that was a little bit into it. I knew a lot of the guys, and also our particular class was extremely strong. So Mel Davis, Larry Jenkins, Tony Prince, Ronnie Rutledge. I mean, we really had a great, say, five guys coming into St. John's at the same time. And I was always of the opinion, geez, I hope I get to play because we're so strong. Plus, the guys are on the team ahead of us. So, it was one of those, this is a great situation. I hope I can get to a level of getting in the game.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Did you know any of those guys ahead of time before you went to St. John's? You know Jenkins, Davis, Prince,
Not
Rutledge?
really. I played a lot of summer basketball and I probably ran into them a little bit. But prior to that, I didn't know Mel. I knew of him. We actually scrimmaged against Boys High while I was at Holy Cross High School. And so I knew him a little bit. And The rest of the fellows I knew about, but really didn't know that much about them, didn't play a whole lot with them. But as soon as we got there and started to play in the summer before school, it was like we really have a good squad here and we had to play freshman basketball.
Right, right.
So
So, okay, go no, go ahead.
And that was, it wasn't like we were being thrown into the varsity to see what we could do. It was a great time to kind of develop your skills on that freshman level, leading to the varsity the following year.
Now you talked about playing, center position in high school. When you decided to go to St. John's, did Coach Carnesecca say, "Hey, you're not going to play center. We're going to try to put you at forward or guard"?
Yeah, so I was tasked with the fact of becoming a forward, and in the approach there would be, you'd have to do your fair share of rebounding and you have to do your fair share of scoring. And I was okay, going to the basket and making moves to the hoop, but I really had to develop more of an outside shot. So I knew that was paramount to get onto the court and play. So how would I distinguish myself? And that was through shooting. And I would go to St. John's, and I was always there. In fact, a lot of times I was there late, and they would actually turn the lights off in the gym, and the fellow would be saying, "Hey, good night, we got to go." So I figured if I could shoot in the dark, I could shoot with the lights on. So that's what I did.
Well, it really worked out well for sure. Um, so okay, before you get to St. John's, right? Literally before you become a freshman, the year before, Frank Mulzoff becomes an assistant coach. Um, the end of his first year as an assistant coach, June of 1969, Lou Carnesecca says, "I'm becoming the coach, general manager, assistant vice president of the New York Nets, but I'm going to stay on for another year." Um, so you're about to go to St. John's as a freshman, and they announced that Frank Mulzoff is becoming the coach. What was that like for you? What did Coach Carnesecca talk to you about that? How did you feel about that, having been wooed by Coach Carnesecca?
Yeah, and um, I'm not quite sure. My recollection of the situation was as freshmen, we didn't know that Coach Cornasecca was leaving.
Okay.
And it was more of okay, we're getting through that. And if I remember correctly, it was towards the end of freshman year that it was announced he was going to the Nets. So I was already there. So I was, our season was, we had a great freshman year. We had a pretty good schedule. We played well. That five or six grouping of players that we had on the freshman team had a fabulous year. And then all of a sudden, coach is now leaving for the ABA. A lot of discussion. What do we do? At least we had played for Coach Mulzoff as freshmen,
Right.
so all of us stuck it out. Losing the name of Coach Carnesecca was like, oh boy, that's a huge transition. But we all stayed. It was amazing looking back that all of us did not leave and transfer.
So
So
did Coach Carnesecca talk to you guys? Did he what was his sentiments about the whole situation? Because he recruited you guys.
yeah, no, and he did discuss with us. It was a great opportunity to go to the pros, and you should stay at St. John's. Our freshman year, both on the court and off the court, was great. So, I think his comments were to stay put, and we all did.
So so Coach Malzoff, like you just said, coached the freshman team. So you knew him. And I know as fans were very excited about your class. And they couldn't, and back then freshmen couldn't play on the varsity until your senior year, when they changed the rule. What was that freshman year like with Coach Mulzoff?
Well, it was quite different because Coach Mulzoff, his style was totally different than Coach Carnesecca. So he was the West Coast offense before anyone knew what that meant. So, and the way we wanted to play was exactly that. So we would get up and down the court. We would, what you see today was really not the way Coach Carnesecca played because he was more ball control and keeping games tight. And Coach Mulzoff was more let it go. Let's get up and down the floor. Let's shoot. Let's play aggressive defense. That will lead to more offense. And that was an exciting way to play. And I think even the fans, when they were watching the freshman team play, they were like, wow, this is really fun to watch. Our first game we played as freshmen was against Harvard. James Brown, who is the noted NFL broadcaster, was on that team. And they had one of the best freshman teams in the country as well. So, right off the bat, our first game was against a highly rated freshman team from Harvard, and we won on a last second shot. And I think the fans were like, whoa, well, this is fun. And then the Harvard varsity came on next, and Coach Carnesecca went into his game plan, and I think a chant went up, "Bring back the freshmen." So
I don't think I saw the freshmen play, but I remember when I saw you guys play as softs. That's the first thing I noticed, the difference between Coach Mulzoff and Coach Carnesecca. You guys ran. You guys went up, and I always thought that was a great way to play. Believe it or not, I was a Celtics fan since the mid 60s. And think about it, the Celtics ran. And for 10 years, in the 60s, they were winning championship after championship. So, in that respect, that wasn't new to me. And I love the fact that you guys ran. I thought, first, it was exciting. I thought it actually made your skills come out better. Not, I mean, you, I mean, just the players in
right.
general. Um,
And that's interesting you say that. I was a Celtic fan too. I was a diehard Celtic fan, and growing up in New York City and Queens, that was tough to do. But the great Celtic teams wanted to play that way. They wanted to play some good defense, block shots, run the floor. And so it was great that we had an access to that style of play through Coach Mulzoff.
So it's interesting. Coach Mulzoff played at St. John's for 3 years, back in the late 40s, I think in 50, 51 as well. He was a uh, co-captain with Al McGuire. So he was a St. John's guy. Um, and he coached in high school before he came to St. John's as an assistant coach. Did you get to know him your freshman year? What was the feeling? Obviously, it's hard to match the personalities of Coach Carnesecca, the reputations of Joe Lapchick. Um, but he was certainly his own man, is the impression I get.
Yeah, we got to know him. He was a very optimistic guy and always pushing for us to get better. I remember we'd shoot around with him like after practice, and he had this old-fashioned two-hand set shot that he still could shoot pretty well at that time. But um, he was a very hard-driven, tough-nosed guy from those days, and that's probably why he was the captain of his teams. But he also had a large family, and he was always off doing other things with his family out on the island. So, and I think it was a tremendous challenge for him, first off, to be the freshman coach because he did live out on the island. So he'd be coming back and forth. And then when he got the head job, he was a high school coach, coached two freshman college teams, and all of a sudden, he's the head coach of St. John's. So that was a big challenge for him.
Um, so you guys played for him freshman year. Fans are very excited. You become a sophomore. Um, did Coach Malzoff talk to you guys about staying after it was announced that he was going to be the head coach?
I'm sure that happened. I don't really recall a whole lot of that, but if the transition itself, I don't recall that ever being oh my God, okay, we got to get out of here. This is not the way we anticipated. So I think the transition was pretty easy, maybe because we were just comfortable with what we had as freshmen. And Coach Carnesecca talking to us and saying this is the place where you should continue. I'm sure Mulzoff and his conversations with us made us at ease. And I really don't recall, like a crisis moment thinking, okay, now what do I do?
Yeah. Right. Well, you
So
guys had played for him for a year, so
yeah, and we were highly successful on the freshman team. So there wasn't a whole lot to point to that was negative, except, just losing the huge name in Coach Carnesecca.
sophomore year. Talk about the sophomore year. What's that like? Can you tell that it's an adjustment for Molzov? Is it an adjustment for the team? how does the season play out?
It's an adjustment because now we're on the varsity. We do have other players with us. Richie Lyons, Mike Kilty. We have Greg Cluse, Billy Phillips. So we really have now we're in the big leagues now. And I think the transition didn't, it was probably more of a transition for the other players, the older players, than for us, because we knew what to expect as far as the style of play. The fellows who were there under Coach Carnesecca were like, "Oh, well, this is interesting." So they had to probably do more adapting than we did.
Gotcha. So it's a pretty successful year. You guys go 18-8. You go into the NIT. Any memories of games, practices that you could share?
No, I just think that everyone enjoyed the transition. I think everyone liked playing the up-tempo approach. Um, the Coach Garnesecca was very adamant about playing defense, and in our style, defense was probably less of a commitment, if you could say that, because we just wanted to get up and down the floor, and we're going to outscore the other team. Not to say it wasn't part of what we needed to do, but it was almost as if we play really good defense, we're going to get some offense out of it. So the mindset really changed quite a bit. So I know our practices were always, we're running, we're going up and down the floor. We'd scrimmage a lot. We were well prepared to know what other teams were doing. And basically, the approach was just to, out West Coast offense those teams. And, during those years, Coach Mulzoff, again, his first year as a head coach in major Division I basketball, is playing against highly rated and veteran coaches. Jack Kraft, Bobby Knight was still around. Um, the Jack McKinney at St. Joe's, Billy Raft at Seton Hall. So he was up against it as far as being a rookie and going against coaches that have had really top level reputations. Coach Mulzoff and his staff always, we would always go through our opponents' prep game plan wise for the opponent. So I think we were in pretty good shape on knowing what the other team could do. And the question is, how were they going to stop us? And I think that was more of our mental attitude. Let them try and stop us.
By the way, as a fan, I love the way you guys played. I really did, and and he was very successful. And I'll tell you, one of the things I could still see it, Billy. But maybe before the game start, he'd be wearing, I think, would be a sort of like a medium gray suit, and then you'd see his red. He'd have a red vest on underneath, which I thought was pretty cool, by the way.
Yeah, I think he was. I think he was a little ahead of his time. A lot of people were like, "Gee, are those bright red socks he's wearing on the sidelines?" Um, he was trying to make a statement. A lot of people were like, "Whoa, that's a little outlandish," but he didn't really care. He wanted to make a statement, so he let it go that way.
Well, I remember the vest, and I thought that was pretty cool, actually. I can still remember that. Um, Let me ask you, how did you guys scout opponents given there was no video back then, right? I mean, there was no tapes to watch. How did you kind of prepare for an opponent?
That was the old days where the assistant coaches, Chuck McCauley and Joel DeAngelis, would actually go out and go watch teams play.
Gotcha.
And they would sit in the stands, get the scouting report prepared, and come back, and we'd have on court and on chalkboard reviews of who the players were, what they did, their plays, and it was old school approach. So a lot of time and effort went into that to prepare for those games.
Do you remember how those assistant coaches actually went to out of town games? Did they fly? Did they take buses? Could they go to all those out of town games?
Well, a lot of our opponents were still part of like the Big East today. So if, we played Boston College, Providence, Seton Hall. So it wasn't as if they were, all parts of the country. So a lot of the games were really from the structure of the Big East as it is now.
Gotcha.
So a lot of those games were local. Even we played like American University, Rhode Island, some of those teams we played. So it wasn't that far away. We were never playing a lot of teams from the coast. In tournaments, that was a different story. So if we were playing a Michigan or say a Dayton or some of those other teams, I'm not quite sure how they pulled that off, but most of the games it was fairly localized where they could get to and see
Gotcha.
them play.
Probably the far away teams, the coaches probably just called their contacts and you know,
And that too, and that was a different world then. And there were game films that were available, and I'm
uh,
sure the coaches would send game films back and forth to each other, and you put it on the old projector, and you'd watch what teams could do.
gotcha. So let me just look some stats for a second. I mean, you had a very good sophomore year. Um, 14, yeah, 14 points a game, 6 rebounds a game. How did you feel, just about your own game that year, your sophomore year?
It was finding my way because my varsity career, getting into my senior year, I never had a full season. I forget whether my sophomore year I had mono or I had a fracture in my foot. So I never really played a complete sophomore and junior year, and that was my demand of myself for senior year is to get through the entire year without missing a game. So from that standpoint, sophomore year, learning the ropes, getting better, working on, making sure you're taking good quality shots, working on rebounding. It was an adjustment period.
Um, so you guys make the NIT. Were you guys disappointed that you didn't make the NCAA that year?
Yeah, because our record every year for those 3 years were quite good, but then don't forget the NCAA was a much smaller field.
Right.
So, we were there knocking on the door. Obviously, we get into the NIT, and you know, it was just like we just missed out. It wasn't as if,
Right.
well, we had a good year, and there's no way we should have gotten in there, but we were close. And the same thing, junior year, we were close again, and then finally senior year, we got in.
So, like you said, it was small. There were 25 teams in the NCAA tournament the years you played, and you guys weren't in a conference, so there was only 8 independent bids.
Right.
Three were in the East, so it was tough to get a bid. But was the team disappointed, or hey, the NIT was still very prestigious then? Were you guys happy? Like no big deal, we're in the NIT.
Um, I don't think the NCAA was as it is now. The NIT, as you say, was still a very prestigious tournament to be in. So, sure, we'd love to get into the NCAA. Okay, but the NIT was in the Garden. It was local, So that was, if I recall, that was like, okay, well, we did the best we could, and let's see how we do in the NIT.
By the way, I remember that year. That was my first year in college. Um, but Fordham was the toast of the town that year. They out of nowhere they come up and they have a phenomenal season. Everyone's talking about Fordham, and they make the NCAA tournament. So I have a feeling that played into it as well. Digger Phelps, this young coach, all of a sudden, everyone's talking about Fordham. So I have to believe maybe that had something to do with it.
Yeah, well, Digger was, high profile, outside of the basketball, he was like a personality. And I think it was good for New York basketball to get Fordham back to a point where they were exciting, they did well, and I think it helped the overall landscape of the New York City area.
Yeah. It turns out I actually knew one of the players who grew up in Forest Hills. You may have played against him, Bart Wojtowicz.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
so when I was a young kid, I knew Bart. We used to go to the same recreation center in the summer, Halsey Junior High School. I got to know him, and I saw him play in junior high. And then all of a sudden, he disappeared. And like I learned years later that he had moved to Fort Lee after, in high school. So he actually played in Fort Lee in high school. And
Yeah.
then I see his name in the box score in 70, 71. I'm saying, whoa, that's where he wound up.
Yeah.
So he was really nice. I mean, he was like 2 years older than me, but he was really a nice guy. And I was really happy that he had success with them.